Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Always ready to explore these interesting topics.
Well, today's is going to be a real head scratcher, I think.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
So we're looking at this text simply called, and I'm not kidding, pasted text.
Pasted text. All right, that's straightforward.
Straightforward title, but the content. Well, buckle up. One line in particular jumped out at me. It says, quote, "The human life is a kind of scam and full of deception," end quote.
Wow, that's a bold statement.
Yeah, scam is a pretty loaded word, so I figured why not dive in and see if there's any truth to it or if it's just, meant to be shocking.
All right, let's unpack that. Where do we even begin with something like that?
Well, I guess the first thing that comes to mind is like, what exactly makes it a scam? What's the deception all about?
Right, right. I mean, when you think about a scam, there's this idea of being tricked, led astray, right? Promising something that isn't delivered. So, what aspects of human life could be seen as that kind of false promise?
Okay, so like immediately I think of like societal expectations, all those messages we get about what a good life looks like, the big house, the fancy car, the perfect family. But does that actually lead to happiness? Or is it just a setup for disappointment?
Yeah, there's that idea of like chasing external validation. We're constantly bombarded with images and ideas of what we should be, how we should look, what we should achieve.
And it's never enough.
Right.
There's always another goalpost, another level to reach.
Exactly. And I think that's where the scam element comes in. We're led to believe that happiness is out there, just beyond the next achievement. But is that really the case?
It makes you wonder, right? Like, what if we're focusing on all the wrong things?
Right, right. I mean, there's a whole body of research in positive psychology suggesting that genuine happiness comes from things like meaningful connections, purpose, and personal growth, not necessarily from the external trappings of success.
So it's not that those things are inherently bad. It's just that they're not the whole story.
Exactly. They can be part of a fulfilling life, sure, but the problem is when they become the sole focus, the be-all and end-all.
And that's a trap that's easy to fall into, especially in today's world with social media and everything. Like, it's constantly in your face.
It is,
Huh?
and it's all curated, right? We're seeing the highlight reels, not the behind-the-scenes struggles.
No.
So it's easy to feel like we're falling short.
Okay, so we've got this idea of societal expectations maybe being part of the scam. But what about other aspects of human life? I mean, the text says full of deception, so I feel like there's got to be more to it.
Absolutely. I think another big one is the whole pursuit of happiness itself.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we're often told that happiness is this constant state of bliss, this feeling we should be striving for, 247. But is that even realistic? Or are we setting ourselves up for failure from the start?
I know I struggle with that. Like some days are great, some days are, not so great, and that's okay, right?
Exactly. Life is full of ups and downs.
Yeah.
And that's where I think the deception lies in this idea that we should always be happy.
So how do we deal with that? If we let go of this idea of constant happiness, what are we left with?
That's a question philosophers have been wrestling with for centuries. But one perspective that I find helpful is Stoicism.
Stoicism. Okay, tell me more about that.
Sure. So Stoicism isn't about eliminating negative emotions altogether. It's more about learning to manage our expectations and finding contentment in the present moment.
So instead of chasing after happiness, it's more about accepting what is and finding peace within that.
Yeah, something like that. It's about recognizing that we don't have control over everything that happens to us, but we do have control over how we respond to it.
That makes sense. So maybe the deception isn't that happiness is unattainable, but that there's only one way to achieve it.
Right. It's about finding what works for you, what brings you meaning and fulfillment. And that may look different for everyone.
Okay, so we've talked about societal expectations and the pursuit of happiness. What else? I mean, this idea of life as a scam, it's such a broad statement. There's got to be more to unpack.
Absolutely. And I think it'd be remiss of us not to talk about, well, the elephant in the room,
Which is,
our own mortality.
yeah, that's the big one, isn't it?
It is. And it's something we often try to avoid thinking about.
I mean, it's understandable,
Yeah.
right? It's not exactly a cheery topic.
Of course not. But I think that avoidance, that fear of death, plays into this whole scam idea.
How so?
Well, because it can lead us to make choices that aren't truly in line with what matters to us. We might chase fleeting pleasures, accumulate possessions, or try to leave some grand legacy, all in an attempt to deny the inevitable.
So the scam is believing that we can somehow outrun our own mortality.
In a way, yes. We might tell ourselves that if we just achieve this or acquire that, then we'll finally be happy and fulfilled. But the truth is, none of that really matters in the grand scheme of things.
It makes you think about what truly matters, doesn't it? If we're all going to die anyway, what's the point of it all?
That's the big question, isn't it? And I don't think there's one easy answer. But I do think that acknowledging our mortality can be a powerful motivator to live more intentionally.
To focus on what truly brings us joy, what makes us feel alive.
Exactly, because in the end, that's all we really have.
Wow, this is getting pretty deep. But I want to circle back to something you said earlier about control. If we're so influenced by societal pressures, fear of death, and this illusion of constant happiness, do we really have free will?
Now that's the million-dollar question. It gets into the whole debate of determinism versus compatibilism.
Okay, break that down for me. I'm not familiar with those terms.
Sure. So determinism basically says that all our actions are predetermined, that free will is an illusion. Compatibilism, on the other hand, argues that free will exists, but it's constrained by our circumstances, our genetics, our upbringing, all of that.
So even if we're influenced by all these external factors, we still have some degree of choice in how we respond to them.
Exactly. We might not be able to control everything that happens to us, but we can choose how we interpret it, how we let it affect us.
So even if life has these elements of a scam, like this pasted text says, we still have some agency in how we navigate it.
Absolutely. And that's where I think it becomes empowering, actually. Recognizing the potential deceptions can help us make more conscious choices.
Instead of just going along with the default settings.
Exactly. We can start questioning those societal expectations, redefine happiness on our own terms, and find meaning even in the face of our own mortality.
This has been a lot to take in, but it's been really thought-provoking. So if I'm hearing you correctly, even if life is a scam in some ways, it's not a game we have to lose.
That's a great way to put it. It's about becoming aware of the game, questioning the rules, and finding our own way to play.
I love that.
Yeah.
All right, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Just this. Think about what parts of your life feel like they might be part of the scam. What expectations are you holding on to that might not be serving you? And how can you start rewriting your own narrative?
That's a great question for everyone to ponder. And that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. As always, thanks for listening, and keep those brains churning.
Thanks for having me. This was a good one.
Until next time.
See ya.